Hello and welcome to Rolling in Mills, and today we're going to be looking at Lone Wolf and Cub, the whole series. There's fucking 6 of them, most of which are by Kenji Mizumi, though 2 of them are not directed by him. Straight up front, I'm going to be spoiling just little tidbits and scenes and overarching pieces of the plots of each of these 6 films. Not that it really matters, because all of these films are so basic that all 6 of them are essentially just the same film, but if you are concerned about there being certain scenes, or you just are so averse to spoilers, then just don't watch this. And like I hinted at earlier, I am going to be reviewing, 6 films simultaneously, and I might have an issue if that's something like the 6 Moral Tales of Eric Romer, where they're very complex drama pieces or something, but all of these films blend so much into each other and have so many similar elements to talk about that you can almost talk about these 6 films as one congruent entity. If you do not know about Lone Wolf and Cub, it is one of the quintessential big movie samurai series. There's 6 of them, which is pretty impressive. Not as impressive as the Zatoichi series, which of course had 25, 26 films. That's absolutely insane. And speaking of which, actually, Kenji Mizumi directed the first Zatoichi film, and then 12 and 8 and maybe 19. But the main thing is that he directed the opening one and then directed 4 of the Lone Wolf and Cub films. This is adapted from a really popular manga of the same name that I haven't read or know anything about, and then it was later adapted into a TV series. So you can kind of see that this is built to be serialized in this mass consumption form. In saying that, that doesn't mean it's bad. There are certain bad films in this series, particularly one of them, but the rest are actually, they were pretty solid. I was a little bit worried getting into this that I'd be watching the same terrible, schlocky, just shit-fest, low-budget crap. And speaking of schlock, the main premise to all of these films is this samurai called Ogami Ito, who is the official executioner for the shogunate. He is framed for murdering his wife by this shadow clan who actually kind of controls the shogunate, and basically his wife is murdered by them and he has to run off with his child, who's 4 years old, and basically he becomes a wandering Ronin assassin called Lone Wolf and Cub. And basically that kind of sounds like a serious plot, but you have to realize that all he does is walk around with his kid in a baby cart, hence a lot of these films are titled Baby Cart in Peril, Baby Cart at the River Styx, so on and so forth. But the baby cart is equipped with ninja weapons. It's got, oh my god, it's got a fucking Gatling gun on the inside of it. A Gatling gun. This is the fucking, 1500s, 1400s? I don't know when the Meiji Restoration happened or whatever, but god damn it. His backstory is played quite seriously in the first film, because, like the opening of a series, this shows his backstory. Actually, that's one of my central complaints about that film. Half the film is told in flashback explaining his really tragic backstory, and the latter half is this ridiculous schlocky action where he's fucking pulling swords off a baby cart and murdering people, and there's a fucking Gatling gun. So you've got this really weird contrast between oh, my wife is dead, the Shadow Clan are coming, and fucking baby cart Gatling gun action. But before I start going through all of the films one by one, there's a few broad points that should be noted for all of them. Number 1, what the fuck is up with this kid's hair? I mean, I'm trying to grapple with reality with this. What is going on? Every element of it is fucking cosmically extravagant. This is what fucking Anthony Fantano is going to look like in 2040. This is the fucking hipster hairdo of Japan in the fucking Meiji era. Second, despite Ito looking really chubby and pretty fucking weird, he does a fantastic job. He's just one of the coolest stone cold killer characters that I think I've seen on screen, and the actor actually does a really good job at handling the action and choreography. He kind of reminds me of Steven Seagal's later career, where he's gotten really fat, but he's not shit at action though.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, because now I will snatch every motherfucker birthday.
But one of the things I do find really funny is that Ito, in a lot of scenes, looks like he's like on the verge of taking a nap. Like he's just extremely bored by people telling him who to assassinate. Third, and this is actually in relation to the previous point, my biggest issue with all of these films, besides being kind of repetitive plot-wise, is that Ito never ever really feels like he's actually in any danger. You know, you gotta have stakes for a plot to be interesting. But you know, and I think I should mention this, the body count in these films is so high. I mean, we're talking like easily 100 plus every single film, especially the later ones, which have these extravagant ending battles, which are just wonderful to watch. I think one of my favorite ways at dealing with having your badass be a badass, but also showing that, you know, he isn't invulnerable, he isn't invincible. It's just this really tiny moment in A Fistful of Dollars where, you know, Clint Eastwood is like, he's fucking Clint Eastwood in those films. He's fantastic. He's walked into town, I think he's already killed like 4 people being the badass he is. And there's this moment where he peeks into a horse-drawn carriage and then he kind of comes back out and there's just a gun in his face and you see like, okay, he isn't immune. He could still fucking die very easily, you know? And in saying that, the second film in the Lone Wolf and Cub series does have antagonists that do feel like they're dangerous, but then he deals with them so quickly that it kind of is just... There's moments where Ito is just charging towards 100 different people and I'm like, yeah, no problem. He's got it in the bag. Fourth, even though I mentioned that all of these films basically have exactly the same plot, all of them are just Ito gets to assassinate people and they pay him money, and sometimes the people who framed him have something to do with it or they're chasing him down as well. All of these films structurally are the same like that. But the thing I love is that aesthetically or whatever, they each just have this really like interesting little unique thing to them that defines them. So, you know, when I think of like the 6th film, it's like, oh, that takes place in the snow and it has these like weird in-camera effects that it does. So even when you do get to the weaker films, they still at least have something that's just a little bit interesting or unique in some way. 5th, these films contain some of the downright fucking weirdest music in them that I've heard, and not weirdest in terms of like the music itself is strange, but it's just a bizarre pick for what it's showing. They basically play jazzy blaxploitation music through a lot of these scenes, and particularly at the intro titles and the credits in the film, and it's just hilarious seeing like a fucking samurai film that has like blaxploitation music. 6th, these films, they're so fucking violent. They are, oh my god, I love them. The amount of fake blood used in these and fake limbs and just, oh my god, it's absurd. I mean, the first film is relatively tame, and then you get to the second one, which is crazy, and then you get to something like the 4th one or the 5th one where you just have hundreds of people just dying, and it has the classic, of course, Japanese squirting projectile blood from Sanjuro, of course, and it's just, I don't think I'll ever just get over just someone being cut down and the blood just exploding out of them. I find it's so hilarious. Everything has to be over the top in Japan. And it's not only just blood effects like that, but some of the ways people die in these films are just wonderful. I think that's always something you look out for, the ridiculous kill, and it definitely delivers on that. On top of that, the prosthetics, the makeup, the practical effects here are really solid for the era. I mean, they're not like absolutely groundbreaking or incredible, but they're really pretty solid. And there's actually some like pretty technically proficient scenes going on, especially in like the 4th and 5th films, where you just got multiple practical effects going off, and just, I mean, the reset times for those sorts of things would be really, really ridiculous. So I really gotta commend some of the choreography, just in regards to how they're choreographing, how the practicals work, but of course the actual fight choreography is generally fantastic as well. And 7th, for a film series titled Lone Wolf and Cub, there's really not that much that Daigoro, Ito's son or cub, actually does in the film. I think there's only 2 of the films, and one in particular, one of the ones that wasn't directed by the original guy that did these. That film actually employs the cub a little bit, and the second film has him kind of be the central focus of one scene, but I just wish they kind of employ that element, considering it's there. Why don't you use it? Like, the baby cart is used 100 times more than the fucking kid inside the cart. And that's it for broad commentary. But now into more specific feedback for each film, and I'll be very brief with this because I don't want to get bogged down in fucking talking about 6 films. Okay, the first film, Sword of Vengeance, which sounds a lot like a much better samurai film, Sword of Doom, which I believe the series takes a lot of reference from, particularly in regards to its climactic fight scenes, which basically copies the climactic fight scene of Sword of Doom. If you haven't seen Sword of Doom, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's probably my favorite samurai film next to Yojimbo. In terms of just being a pure blood and gore slasher film, basically, it is by far my favorite in that regard. And it isn't just a fantastic samurai film, it is just a fantastic film, period. Anyway, the first, Lone Wolf and Cub, ironically and strangely enough, is by far my least favorite of any of these. Normally when you get to like a really long series, it's always the first one that's amazing because that's the one that spawns, 5 sequels. And when I was going into this, that's what I was really worried about, was that the first one was going to be great and the rest of them were going to be point-for-point copies of that. I was completely wrong. The first one is super fucking weird, honestly. It's almost like experimental in terms of its narrative structure. As I mentioned before, it has these fucking, half the film is in flashback, and it's all about Ito's wife dying, and then he's got to like try get his son to come with him, or if not, he'll kill him, and it's like, okay, the backstory is okay. But it goes on for quite literally like, 30, 40, 45 minutes, and you're like, okay, where's this going? It's in flashback, and so I'm thinking, okay, the end of this film is he's going to kill someone from the Shadow Clan that, had something to do with his wife's murder. That is not what happens at all. The flashback is just during his walk somewhere. Then he turns up at a brothel, and then they're like, we need you to assassinate someone. And he goes, okay. And that plot has nothing to do with his backstory, which is like, what? And basically, in terms of script writing, that is like the furthest step away from Chekhov's gun, Chekhov's gun being the principle that if you establish Chekhov's gun in the first act, it has to come back later on in the story, particularly in the third act. Someone has to be shot with it. Someone has to do something with the gun if you've established it as an element in the story. So if you have 45 minutes of the film be about this guy's backstory, then you gotta have it pay off somehow. It doesn't pay off even remotely, and it's not essential to his character either. Like, he could just be an assassin, and that would make sense. He doesn't have to be a Ronin who's, his wife's died, and he's been the, official shogunate's executioner, and so on and so forth. It's very unnecessary. Also, like a couple of these other films, there's a really uncomfortable, completely randomly interjected sex scene that's kind of not a sex scene, and it goes on for like 10 minutes, and it's like I'm watching like a snuff film. It's very, very creepy, basically. One of the only things I actually like about this film that I think is really pretty cool, and this kind of comes back in the 5th one as well. The opening scene is Ito executing a child, which I think is very interesting for your protagonist. And he's kind of meant to be like an anti-hero because he's like an assassin and he's at the crossroads of destiny or whatever the fuck he keeps saying, the crossroads of hell. And he's like very immoral and he's going against the samurai code by assassinating people. And he'll murder whoever people ask him to murder. But I do like that the opening thing we see of him is as the executioner following orders to murder a child who, his family did something. There is some good action as well. Ito is, as in all of these films, just fantastic. His presence is great, but besides that, there's really not much the film offers at all. I consider this one a 49 out of 100. Now onto the second Lone Wolf and Cub film, Baby Cart at the River Styx, or Styx. I know it's from Greek mythology, but I've never been sure how to actually pronounce that. This is arguably the best out of all the films. I don't think it's my personal favorite, but it's by far the best constructed, the most dynamic in terms of action, set pieces, antagonists. The villains in this one are, by far the best. They're just these really pretty cool guys who have these unique abilities, and they are the only people in the whole series that basically feel like they're actually a threat. And, going into the final fight, I'm like, okay, I can see these guys being a threat. And the main reason for that is they're actually set up as being fucking badasses themselves. This isn't the most panoramic looking of all these films. Some of the later ones are just beautifully shot, but this one is beautifully shot in the sense that the blocking and just the action is framed and shot just amazingly well, and there's just some really cool, like, quintessential hero shots in this that are just they just feel good when you cut them, and editing is great in this one. Has that kind of Kurosawa power punch feel to the cuts and the swings, and just the way the camera moves is very, very, musical, which is quite a far stretch from the first film, which was just kind of really blocky. It felt like people who didn't really know what they were doing, which is really surprising because it's directed by the same guy, so I don't know. And weirdly enough, this film actually works better as the intro film to watching Lone Wolf and Cub. I would all the way recommend watching this first, not only as the first Lone Wolf and Cub film you watch, but if you're interested in watching these films and don't really know where to start with this one. It's just a really good intro to the series, basically. There's also some of the best action in this one, and some of like the weirdest experimentation. I mentioned before that each film has a unique element to it. This one has a few. For one, there's a scene involving ninja women who use root vegetables as weapons, which is the second time I've seen that happen, next to the fantastic Clive Owen film Shoot 'Em Up, in which his primary weapon is a fucking carrot, which is fucking hilarious. This film has so many fucking just bizarre scenes in it. I'm going to show you this one, and keep in mind, I have not touched this in any way editing wise. This is a scene that actually happens in the film. I'm not sure if it's meant to be serious. Everything else surrounding the scene, tone-wise, is serious. I can't even ease you into it. You just gotta go and fucking try. Here it is. Yet again, this film contains a really weird, like, sex rape scene. Again, it feels like I'm watching a fucking snuff film, because for some reason during this whole scene, there's just no music playing, and the camera's really, like, still. Yeah, it's just like, it just totally changes tone. You're like, oh, I'm watching a rape snuff film now. Anyway, this is, like, structurally and action-wise and blocking-wise the most sound film, I think. It isn't my personal favorite simply because I think the crazy style of the later films is better because they're really, really ridiculous, but as an actual film, this one is probably the best. This is a 76 out of 100 from me. Now onto the third film, Lone Wolf and Cub, Baby Cart to Hades. They've got this weird, like, Greek thing going on in the titling system, and also the repetitive use of the word baby cart. Also, there isn't anything Greek about any of these films, and there's no references to Greek mythology within the films either, so I don't know what's up with that. I don't really have a lot to say about this one. This kind of serves as the prototypical model for the fourth and fifth and even sixth film, but it doesn't do it as well as they do because it's only a prototype, and the fourth and fifth ones really build on the model that it establishes. This is kind of the beginning of where these films start to look really, really nice and panoramic, and they're still shot well for action, but you've got these really cool, like, sunset shots and nature shots, and it is very much appreciated. I think it will look really, really good in the Criterion, like, Blu-ray restoration. Plot-wise, this one's really disjointed. It kind of does the thing that the first one does, where, like, the first 25 minutes of this film are about, yet again, another rape. I think there's a rape in every single one of these films, and it's uncomfortable to watch and shot very weirdly and atypically compared to the rest of the film, and its purpose is always kind of dubious, like in this case where Ito kind of gets involved and this other very powerful samurai get involved, and he wants to duel Ito, but then that plot is forgotten for the rest of the film until after basically everything is concluded. Ito's finished his big climactic battle, and that guy turns up and is like, hey Ito, duel me, and Ito's like, sure, and he just kills him, and then that's the end of the film, and it's like, yet again, Chekhov's gun. Yeah, he does come back, but do you need him to be in the film for 25 minutes for a 3-minute scene at the end that has nothing to do with the rest of the plot? Not really, and also the middle of this film is disjointed, and it's really all over the place, but it doesn't really work like 3 separate stories within the same film. This one's really forgettable besides some great kills, and it's a 67 out of 100. Now onto the fourth film, Lone Wolf and Cub, Baby Cart in Peril. Now this is my personal favorite out of all these. I don't think it's structurally as good as the second one, but goddamn, the action and the set pieces and the really actually stunning cinematography here just kind of blows me away a bit. There are some shots that are genuinely, like, kind of breathtaking, and the editing like in the second one, is the best in the series. It's really punchy. The hits feel like good hits. The action is so fluid and clear that it in no way feels like a film from the 70s. It feels a lot more recent than that. For example, there's a fantastic fight scene, possibly my favorite in the entire series in terms of creativity and just the way it's just really ingeniously shot, the way it flows, where Ito goes to pray in this temple and all these ninja like burst out of these statues that they're hiding in, which is really cool because it's like nothing is sacred. But the way it's shot is really cool because there's also ninjas in the ceiling and they swing down, and just the way the camera moves around Ito, it's really stunning, very well planned. The choreography is fantastic as usual. Just good action. Also, for some reason, there's a narrator in this film. Yet again, a unique element that isn't in, from memory, any of the other films. It's like, oh, hey, there's a narrator now. Let's never have that again. There's also, yet again, some great schlock flash zooms and blood everywhere and people having their fucking limbs removed. The ending fight scene here. Oh, it's just so fucking cool. As I mentioned earlier, the third film is kind of like a prototype for the fourth and the fifth. And the main reason for that is that the third film and kind of the second one are the first to introduce a huge action, massive amount of people set piece that Ito fights against or works his way through. Like I was saying, very similar to the ending of Sword of Doom. This is this moment where Ito grabs fucking 2 katanas and starts dual wielding and starts going ham, and my nipples start fucking lactating and my fucking dick grows 7 floors tall, and it's just, oh, it's fucking glorious, glorious schlock. Yet again, per usual, there's a really out of place rape in this film. Yet again, it's creepy. And weirdly enough, it's done by a different director. This was the first one not directed by Mizumi. I consider this a 76 out of 100. Now onto the fifth film, Baby Cart in the Land of Demons, the last of the Baby Cart quadrilogy. This one, yet again, like the fourth one, fantastic, full of murder and blood and schlock and gore. It isn't as refined as the fourth one is in this. It's kind of all over the place in parts. Not as much as the sixth one, which is like barely a film in that regard. So this does have a plot, but the best thing about it is it just has probably like the craziest action and murders in the whole series. I feel like 4 strikes that perfect balance between crazy schlock murder and great structure, which is like 2 has the great structure, 5 has the crazy, crazy, crazy murders. 4's kind of in the middle between those two. This one, unlike most of the rest of them, actually does a really good job at making the assassination plot quite interesting. They change it up by Ito having to like kill these different samurai who are testing him, and with each one he kills he finds out like a little bit more information about who he has to assassinate. Only issue is that halfway through this film it just kind of forgets about that, and then it doesn't really matter, and then he just kills the people anyway, so it's kind of like it goes against the really great like technique it's set up, but it doesn't really matter because the plots of these films, I mean, you may as well just not have them. It's all about the killing, and this one really delivers on the killing yet again. Like the fourth film, the enormous action set piece at the end of this is so absurdly ridiculous, and it is by far the most reflective of the Sword of Doom ending, and has this really crazy thing where the ending of the film mirrors the beginning of the first film, where Ito straight up just executes a 5-year-old child, which is like, that's a cool thing for your protagonist to do. I would love if there were more like moral ambiguity to that or exploration of that, but it doesn't matter. He just kind of just walks in and it's just like, you're dead now, bye. It's almost like it's not even covered as a thing that you should worry about. It's just like, oh yeah, he murdered that child. Yeah, that's fine. The film like doesn't linger on it at all or even play it as being something that's remotely strange. But the best thing I like about that is that he reprises his role as the executioner of the shogunate. It's really nice, like, tie back into his backstory without it being really, really overt. Also, this is the first and only film to really include his son, Daigoro. There's a really, like, subtle little scene where he notices this traveler on the road actually has poison that he's going to serve Ito in the form of tea, and it turns out that he's actually one of the samurai guys that Ito has to kill to be able to get more information. So it's just a really subtle way of involving his son. If this film was a little bit more concise, a little tighter, I would consider this by far my favorite, a 73 out of 100. Now on to the sixth and final Lone Wolf and Cub film, White Heaven in Hell. Honestly, I actually don't have that much to say about this because it's basically the most generic storyline of the other films, but it just has these really bizarre supernatural elements to it. Like, for some reason, there are like zombie ninjas in it. Zombie ninjas who tunnel through the ground. And not only that, it's just, yet again, the plot, it's so all over the place. The intro titles of the film are actually set at the end of the film, and then the film just cuts straight into something else, and you're like, what the fuck? And speaking of which, before I get ahead of myself, the gimmick of this is that a lot of the film takes place in like a winter snow land thing, hence the title White Heaven in Hell. And there's not really any reason it takes place in the snow besides the fact that there is just an enormous battle at the end, like in the case of the fourth and fifth film, except now it's ninjas on sleds, ninjas on ice. And of course you just have a fantastic scene where it's Ito riding the fucking baby cart down a snow mountain while shooting ninjas with a Gatling gun. What more could you possibly ask for from this film? Well, I can think of a few things. The main one is fucking coherence of the narrative. The beginning and middle of this film are nothing. Just nothing of note even happens. I'm actually struggling to remember any scenes from this whole period. And even so, it's probably the worst in terms of just nothing going on. Like, even when the films are generic, there's always like a fight scene or you know, something going on that's interesting. And sadly, there's none of that until the ending fight scene, which is glorious as usual, and even more ridiculous because of the fucking zombie ninjas, and of course, fucking ninjas skating on ice. Also, the film kind of has all these overarching themes of like the Yagyu Shadow Clan. They've literally lost every single member to Ito, basically. Like, he's killed everyone they sent after him 5 times in a row. There's all these kind of nods to the fact that they've got no one left and they're sending out their final big force in one big attack. And then Ito defeats all of them except the big bad guy, and then he just gets away at the end, just randomly. And it kind of felt like it was like, we understand this is the last Lone Wolf and Cub film, we're going to close it out with a bang and we're going to finally resolve everything, but then it doesn't, and it just kind of leaves it like, oh, there could be more. Generally, I'm not impressed by this one. It's really dull, really generic, and even with the action sequence at the end being so standout in how bizarre it is, it just has that gimmick element and doesn't build on the ending fight scene of the third film, the fourth film, or the fifth film, which do the ridiculous action quite a bit better. Overall, this is a 63 out of 100 for me. Whew, and that's it. 6 films in one review. I didn't think I would ever do that. Per usual, I stick to 1, but now I've fucking jacked that shit up to 6. My man, yo. New content actually is coming if you're wondering why there's been kind of a drought. I quite literally have 16 videos in production for November. That's a thing. Contextually, this won't make any sense for people who are watching this even in a month's time, but know that I'm very busy right now and this period of my channel has been a little bit dry. I understand you're probably waiting on that shit. Got a video essay coming, which I'm pretty fucking happy with. Got podcasts, got reviews, got all that shit coming. Check that shit out. A like and subscribe, etc. You know, fucking suck me off. Very appreciated, especially if it's done for free. And yeah, au revoir.